we're always on the lookout here for people who are using creativity for trying to make our country better, and particularly facts. Because as we all know, part of why two-way exists is to try to bring everybody together around a common set of facts. You can disagree with someone, but you can't invent your own facts. And you must think about what kind of organizations do we need to be a counterweight to the loudest angry voices on the national town square who use various modes, including social media, to present things that aren't factual. I know as a fact, Joe Biden had good days and bad days. I know that for a fact. And you don't need secret sources. You can watch C-SPAN and see State of the Union. Great night. He clearly was able to deliver that speech. The debate, bad night. Lots of examples, but facts so that we can have a national conversation based on real things. And so always on the lookout. Steve Ballmer decided to take his creativity and his intelligence, his connections, and build an organization called USA Facts. And the beauty of this is it takes government data and makes it accessible to the American people in a way that wasn't otherwise being done. So we're going to bring Mr. Ballmer in just a moment. But here, number 17, Sam, is a little bit of a new video coming out that'll give you an idea of the creativity and the reach of Mr. Ballmer's organization.
It's important to note that tax policy changes a lot, and it certainly drives a lot of what gets discussed in Washington, D.C. Here's how individual tax brackets have changed over the last 3 decades. The Tax Reform Act of 1986 reduced the number of brackets from 14, that's a lot of brackets, to just 2, with rates of 15% and 28%. Through the years, there have been 6 other big changes. The most recent, with the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017, called the TCJA, but also called the Trump Tax Cuts. It lowered most rates from 2012, leaving us with 7 rates as of the date of this recording, which is March 17th of 2025.
All right, again, just part of the video that will be out soon. And now, joining us, first time on Two Way, Steve Ballmer. Steve, welcome in. Unmute yourself if you would, and grateful to you for joining. I cannot hear Steve. Can others hear him? No. All right. Steve's going to work on his audio. While he does that, I'll remind everybody, if you want to be in on the conversation, please raise your electronic hand if you're on the Two-Way platform. If you're watching on X or on YouTube, no smack in the chat for our guests. All right. Steve is unmuted. Try again. No. All right. Let's see. We'll work on that. Maybe we can help.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir. Hear you good.
Okay.
Welcome, and thank you for joining. Very grateful to you for being part of this. And how many takes did that video require?
It depends. It depends on how you think about things.
Yeah.
You could say it was one take that took us many hours. Yeah, it doesn't really take that long. We work hard on a script and then we go in and film it. And sometimes it'll take me twice to not stumble over my words. But, all told, I'd probably take 4 or 5 hours in the studio for
Well, very nice performance and really incredible graphics. As someone who's worked with graphics my whole career, you and your team have an eye for how to explain this stuff. I want to ask you about your organization, and I want to move to the question of taxes, which is the subject of this new video. How did you get the idea for the organization, for USA Facts? How did it come about, and how did you implement it?
Yeah, it's actually sort of a funny story how I got there. I retired. I was CEO of Microsoft, retired 11 years ago, and my wife wanted me to get involved with our philanthropy, focused on kids and families in which the kids probably don't have, let's say, have a shot at the American dream by virtue of the circumstances of their birth. And I was kind of tired, and I said, no, I don't need to work on that. We just need to pay our taxes because the government really takes care of all of that. And let's be happy taxpayers. And, she said, no, we can do better than that. Come on. So, of course, I did. But I had a little bit, maybe it's only my disease. I'll call it a little spousal disease that said I I really wanted to prove her wrong. In order to do that, I had to start looking at what really happens, who pays taxes, who benefits from taxes paid. And I found it very hard to see something that was well integrated at the federal government level, let alone state and local government. And I don't think you can really consider these things without looking at state and local government. For example, state and local governments pay for Medicaid, they pay for part of transportation. So, how do you put these things together and look at them coherently? I started kind of bumbling around, looking for stuff, not finding much on the internet. I had a TA in a class I was teaching at Stanford, spent a little extra time. I met an economist, not that we want economic analysis or forecasting, just what has happened, not why it's happened, just what's happened. And he knew his way really around government databases very well. And eventually I decided the organizing kind of framework should be like a 10K report that public companies have to file with the Securities and Exchange Commission. Now, they are bland. They give the numbers. Here's how much we did in revenue. Here's how much we did in expenses, blah, blah, blah. We don't explain why. We don't give forecasts for the future. You got to have full context. You can't not talk about part of the business. But that's what I would have wanted to, that's what I used to read when I wanted to understand another company. And it's really what I wanted to read to understand the government. Numbers are important. Adjectives are partisan. Numbers are not partisan. Forecasts are partisan. I used to think they weren't because economics, which was kind of my major, is a science. But of course, then you can't have a right-wing economist and a left-wing economist. So I decided no forecasts unless they're official forecasts, for example, by the for Social Security, trust fund, et cetera. And we don't do any causality. We're not going to try to explain to you why X, Y, Z are happen. Just here's the numbers. Here's what's going on. And it's, kind of reflects my personality. I'm a skeptic. I don't want people interpreting things for me because then I'm never sure what their axe was to grind. And so we put that together. We actually we write every year a 10K to keep ourselves intellectually honest. When you get into it, of course, the purpose of government is not profit and loss. So you actually do have to write about outcomes. What are our educational outcomes every year? What is the standard of living for people? What is their income? What does standard of living look like after you receive, whatever transfer payments you're going to receive? So that's long-winded story, but that's how I got here, Mark.
Okay. And when your organization is working, when USA Facts is achieving its mission, what does that look like?
To me, it's actually kind of 3 or 4 different things. First of all, I'd like to reach a broader than narrower swath of Americans. If you told me we were only for politicians and I call them the wonks, policy makers, economists. No, I'm not investing in this for that purpose. I'd like us to get to tens of millions of Americans. Hundreds of millions, probably beyond our reach right now, because you got to like numbers or at least charts a little bit, and you got to be interested. Not everybody's interested, but I think there's tens of millions of people who fall into the category. We don't reach tens of millions of people yet on a regular basis. I think we need to be able to meet people where they are. Some people like shorter snippets. We're trying to avoid giving you like a politician does. They'll pick one number completely out of context. And so we try to avoid that, but we need some shorter things. So we do have some social media information that we put out there. Some people really are willing to sit patiently. And so we have our longer form reports. We have these 15-minute videos that we do. And we're trying to find also some middle. We do video now in addition to doing text. We've got a newsletter. We've got over 550,000 subscribers, which says there is interest in this kind of stuff out there. I think on YouTube now we're closing in on 100 million views of our videos. So there's definitely a there in terms of what people are interested in. And if we can help educate people, they have to decide what to do with it. If they understand a little better, if it changes their opinion, if they talk to a friend, if they call a congressperson, so much the better.
So who's your ideal consumer of your information? A parent,
ID.
a parent, a taxpayer? Who's a, who's the
I would
ideal?
I would say I would say certainly taxpayers. Now, at the end of the day, like I said, we're not going to have everybody interested in this topic any more than we're going to have everybody in the world engage with, various media outlets and podcasts. But there is a group of people there. I don't want just the narrowest group of people who are hyper interested. So I think it's better to say taxpayers is probably a better description.
Right.
uh, I don't want just sort of the most educated elite. I'd like a broader audience than that. I think that's important. And yet, because we do believe in numbers and charts, there are very smart people who just don't think in numbers the same way. And I'm not saying we want to be just for people who are math heads, but you
Yep.
got to feel a little bit comfortable around, some of the kind of stuff that we present.
Right. A question I know you get all the time. It's important. Where does the data come from? And what do you do with it to make it different than just somebody going to a government website?
The truth is, we get all of our data just from government websites.
Yeah.
we, if it's like a 10K report that government that a public company produces, you only use the company's data. You don't say, "I'm going to tell you what somebody else says about our business." You say what we say about our business. So we only use government sources. We use about 100 different government databases to do our work. The thing government does not do, or the two things government doesn't do, number one, it doesn't present itself very well. It's not as if somebody says, "Hey, Census Bureau, please make your stuff approachable and simpler to digest than all of these detailed database reports." It just doesn't happen. Same thing with any other government database. The second thing nobody does is try to integrate these things. So we're trying to do something holistic. And it's certainly the case that let's say the Bureau of Justice Statistics and the Bureau of Labor Statistics, they're not paid to integrate their stuff any more than they are to make it readable. You want my dream? My
Yeah.
dream is that work just like a public company, and Congress and the president are required to produce the kind of report we do and actually sign that says, "I have read this, and this accurately reflects the state of what's going on in our government." That's what CEOs have to do.
Right.
In my dream, and I know it's a dream, and it's not going to happen while I'm alive, government should have the same level of accountability, both as to the accuracy of the data and acknowledging that people actually have read and know what the data is.
Okay. A few more questions for me, and then you all will get your chance to ask Mr. Ballmer a question. So if you want to be in the conversation, you're here on the two-way platform, please raise your hand. Just tell folks sort of like the cycle of what you do. So how often are you getting new data? How often are you publishing things? If people really want to, go to usafacts.org or go to your social media, how often will they see new things?
Yeah, we update our databases as the data gets updated on the government website. So 100 different databases that get updated on different schedules. What we're trying to do now is to get to real-time availability of the data. So we don't take as much processing time, and we have some new technology techniques that we're using for that. Now, we assemble this in various forms. We publish our newsletter essentially weekly, sometimes even a little bit more often. We have articles that we put into those newsletters. We have social media. You'd see us on Instagram and X, etc., even TikTok. Pretty much every day we'd be putting something new out. The reports, we write our 10K and our annual report, no surprise, once a year.
Yeah.
And now we've taken to doing videos. I can't say we have a regular publishing schedule, but we have 6 or so videos coming out in the first 7 or 8 months of the year, just to give you a sense of flow. Best thing to do, subscribe to our video channel on YouTube, come to our site. the other big source of traffic for us is we do a very good job of search engine optimization. So on certain topics, you're likely to get steered to us by Google, or I have to mention Bing since I'm a Microsoftie at heart. But we do that as well.
Why hasn't Bing done better to get more market share?
We came to market a little too late.
Yeah.
There are your product is better the more traffic you have.
Right.
And that built let me call it a virtuous cycle for Google. Now I would say Microsoft's got a pretty damn comparable product, but it's hard to get back in the game. They have more advertisers, so they get more dollars essentially per view than you do on Microsoft, which means they can pay more to people like Apple to buy traffic.
And they became a verb.
They became a verb. It's always nice to be a verb.
Yeah. What do you think of DOGE as from the point of view of government data?
DOGE is interesting because DOGE isn't about government data. DOGE is a user of government data.
Right.
They were trying to, or are trying to drive some notion of what efficiency looks like, and they are a user of data. Some of it is our kind of data. Some of it is, we have not gone through, for example, all the grants that various agencies have made, which, DOGE has certainly spent some time on that. And DOGE does have they have an agenda. There are certain things they think should change, and the data that they tend to surface. And I'm not saying they're different than anybody else in government, right, left. People do have agendas and try to make things happen. The thing I think is important when in these discussions, at least I would want DOGE to do, is always put in context. We're saving $50 million, but we're also telling you that we're going to reduce our deficit by $1 trillion. Giving the context, where does government spend its money like we do? Therefore, if we want to trim $1 trillion, there's like 7 things that account for 92% of federal spend. So if you're not cutting any of those 7, it's going to be hard to come down by $1 trillion. And the 7 are obvious: Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, defense spending, interest on the debt. You include state and local, then you get education, and then programs designed to support people who are less affluent outside of the Medicaid support.
Right. How is USA Facts using AI now, and how will you use it in the future?
Yeah, we're actually using AI really well now to help us comb these government databases and bring the data together. So talk about it now as a tool to help us do our job. We have a whole set of tools we use to make sure we don't wind up with hallucinations. That's obviously a value proposition to our customers. We even have the AIs check each other to make sure we get the same result from 2 different systems. They check each other's data. So we're using it to assemble our back-end database. The next generation work will essentially let us take that accurate data and then put a bot on top of it, so that you can have an interactive discussion about government data with, if you will, our chat bot that doesn't speak to the open internet. So you're not getting third-party opinions. It only works against the government data that we've assembled.
And is that there yet, or that's coming?
It's coming. It's coming.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I know a little too much about software to want to say specifically what the date will be, but it's not a dream for the distant future. Hopefully we can get something out this year.
Great. That would be very powerful. All right, let's go to your questions again. As always, unmute. Tell folks where you are in case they don't know, and your question about USA Facts for Steve Ballmer. First is Erica. Welcome.
Hey, Mark, thanks for calling on me. I'm really enjoying this. It's more of a comment, but what I loved about the video at the beginning was that I was left having no idea what Steve's opinion is on the tax plan that he was discussing. And because I spend most of my time thinking about K-12 and curriculum and bias in schools and sort of agendas and what's presented to kids, we almost never see anything that's like the video you just showed. And so I don't mean to give him extra jobs, but if I would love it if other people could be thinking about ways to get that kind of content in front of students, regardless of red state, blue state, red city, blue city, because students are not getting that. They almost never see something, especially on an issue that's political in nature, which is so many of the issues, especially now. They never come away not knowing what they're supposed to think. And I just loved that video because I was like, oh, this is great. The guy sounds so intelligent. This is so helpful to me to understand it. And I don't even know where he lands. And that's exactly how I feel like it should be more often. So really just a comment that if anybody listening or watching has thoughts about how to make this happen for kids, about things other than tax policy, I think it would be a huge service to the country.
Erica, thank you. And Steve, it's a brilliant insight because I've looked at a lot of your stuff, and Erica's right. You guys clearly spend a lot of time crafting the language, building the graphics to have the ability to communicate with anybody without them saying this is a left-wing thing or a right-wing thing.
Well, we will be trying to, we have 50 people, which is a lot, but it's a little relative to the whole problem. But what we hope to do is find over time a curriculum partner or partners who might want to do something with this. I actually bemoan civics education because I think civics education doesn't go quite far enough. You can understand a lot about our government without actually understanding some of the key things you're going to want to know later. How much taxes do I pay? What does it go for? We do need to know there's 3 branches of government and a system of checks and balances. But I think we should probably be teaching a little bit more civics because government does pop up in people's day-to-day lives. And I don't think, and oh, by the way, I think you could teach math by using our stuff too.
I
Erica,
suspect
thank you.
so. Thanks.
Great question. Great comment / question. Appreciate it. Let's go to, I hope I'm pronouncing it right. You've been before. Michael, what is it?
Yeah, Michelle, you got it right.
Michelle, welcome in. Thanks for joining. Tell us where you are and your question for Steve Ballmer.
I'm originally from Iran, but I've spent almost half of my life in Los Angeles, California now. But I wanted to say thank you for this show. Because of your show, I almost called the electoral map 100. I did call the electoral map 100% for the election. And it's not a question. I was just thinking with the deepfakes and these, videos getting really good. I was just thinking you cannot tell the difference between I cannot tell the difference anymore. And one way to fight that, I was thinking, would be document what the politicians, what these people in power, in office are saying, and basically have a database connected to ChatGPT. And so like a known database. What do you think would be ways of fighting these deepfakes? Because they're getting so good, basically.
Great question. Steve, can you tackle that one?
It is a great question. I mean, I do think one of the things that will wind up being super important is to either view or read these things off of the website of the provider. And authenticity of website is easier to tell than most things. But if you want to share them or put them in other places, take YouTube as an example, we are going to have to find ways to chain back and essentially verify authenticity with the original publishing site. It'll be essential, and it's not been on the top of our queue because I know it's something the technology industry is working on more broadly, and I'll count on my old friends at Microsoft and some of the other great technology companies to solve these problems because I know they're on their minds.
Michelle, thank you for the question. Much appreciated. Now, Steve, there's somebody here who says a former Microsoft employee. For some previous CEOs, I'd be a little worried about bringing in former employees, but I happen to know you were beloved by the people of Microsoft. So I bring in Tom without any fear that he'll say anything except what a wonderful boss you were. Tom, welcome in. tell folks who don't know where you are and what's on your mind for your former boss.
Yeah, I'm in Silicon Valley. I was an intern in 2002 and a blue badge from '03 to '05. So appreciate connecting with you, Steve. I had a question about I think part of the premise of what you're doing assumes that people are able to consume the data and interpret it, and even though you make it easier, I wonder if, maybe building on the earlier comment, if there are efforts to help kids develop critical thinking skills and data-driven kind of scientific method thinking skills, then they would be able to consume all this great work that you guys are doing. Because I worry a little bit that it'll be relevant to 10%, but those of us, we're already into the data. We're not reaching, the folks that flip elections.
Yeah, big challenge, Steve.
Yeah, there's kind of two parts to that. Part number one is, we only have 33%, maybe it's 31 off the top of my head. I may be off a couple percent of kids in 8th grade are proficient in math. Unless and I found, I did a talk one time and the moderator gave me a problem from an 8th grade math proficiency test. Well, I'm a math major, but you could just see the blood drain out of the people in the audience saying, shoot, I'm not sure I could do that. So I do think we got to start with better math proficiency for a higher percentage of people. Unfortunately, that's not ours to solve. And if we're really going to be nonpartisan, man, we got to stick with numbers. We do, because every adjective, in my opinion, is partisan. If you say 2 is much bigger, 2 is double what it used to be, and we're really talking about something that can vary between 1 and 100, and it went from 1 to 2, is that adjective really helpful? Or is that adjective potentially confusing? If you said something goes from 1 to 2 out of a total possible of 100, guess what? You have enough context then to make a decision. So I'm not sure we'll get there for people who aren't somewhat comfortable with numbers and pictures of those numbers. But our society does need to work on math and language arts proficiency skills. They're just too low, in my opinion.
Tom, thank you. Very grateful to you. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks, Mark.
Steve, do you imagine that if you do find an education, a curriculum partner, that the content will have to be changed to be more accessible to kids of different ages, or is the current content meant to be accessible to anybody?
No, the curriculum provider would definitely need to do some work with us to be in an appropriate level, both in terms of where people are in their comprehension, as well as, if you will, age and what their interests might be. No question. Now, I've taught this class 4 times, a seminar at Stanford. I did not need to change the material, but that's a very elite group. The question is, what would you need to do for, let's call them high school seniors, and those who are more proficient, less proficient in math? We need curriculum partner to really work with on this.
Okay. Young Kim, welcome in. Tell folks who don't know where you are, after you unmute, and what's on your mind for Steve Ballmer. One more time.
There it goes. Is that good? Good.
Yes.
I just got the stun, so I'm calling in from New York near Chappaqua. Thank you for taking me. I thought about a sports question on data as a sports franchise owner, but I'm going to switch. I just wanted to talk about healthcare, because I wanted to segue with we talked about the Biden and his health. And I guess the question is, you must have thought about this, right? To introduce data science in healthcare. This is an important need right now. I used to be a faculty member at Hopkins and at Vanderbilt, and when I have medical students or undergraduates who are interested in healthcare, and I keep on telling them, there's a huge need for data scientists in medicine right now, a massive need, because we have mounds of data and we don't know what to do with them. we do not know what to do with them yet. There's a lot of progress. So I guess my question to you, Mr. Ballmer, how do you see data science shaping up in healthcare?
Yeah, and I'll speak to that about which I know something and not that which I do not. I'm
Okay.
not an expert in the healthcare field. I can't imagine that there's any field at all that won't be heavily impacted by better use of data. Um, I have a buddy from Microsoft who started a company that focuses in on collecting data out of electronic medical records on behalf of hospitals and making it more digestible. So there's certainly a need. Now, if I put on my USA Facts hat, let me tell you some basic things which I would love to have data to characterize. What do we really spend our healthcare money on? I would like to be able to present how much is spent in the last year of someone's life. Or after they got a certain diagnosis. How much is spent on various disease classes? How much is spent not only by government insurance programs, VA, Medicaid, Medicare, government employee and pension, but also will government collect any of that as it relates to private insurance? In terms of thinking through and making policy, I think those are important things. And there's a need for more data, better data. That data does not exist in a good form. I have an outside partner who thinks they may have cracked the nut, so to speak. But and we'll only do it our way, i.e., with government data. But I think if you want to really talk about our healthcare system, and you want to talk about what it costs and what kind of outcomes it gets, you need to look at those things. I actually think, and we do a pretty good job of this, you need to look at the non-healthcare factors. Who knows whether it's the things I do outside the healthcare system that affect my health more or the things inside the healthcare system? I don't know. But certainly, do I exercise? People think that might make a difference. Do I walk every day? Am I obese? Do I drink? All of those things are viewed as having an impact on health. And it's almost easier to paint that picture with the available data than some of the details of what the doctors and hospitals are actually doing.
Young Kim, thank you. Hey, Steve, can USA Facts answer the questions you just asked? Because they were perfectly phrased and framed.
Not at this time. We don't have the government data. I'm not sure the government has the data in exactly the right form. This would obviously have to start someplace in DHS, in the Health and Human Services.
Yeah.
At least for Medicare and Medicaid, I'm sure we'll get to the bottom of what they have at some point. It will be able to be available in a way we can make sense of it.
Yeah. Young Kim, thank you. And you opened the door to my asking a couple sports questions. Who do you, your Clippers, your beloved Clippers did not make it past the early rounds, but who do you like of the teams remaining? Who do you like to win the title?
Oh, asking you which of your competitors you want.
Well, let me ask you this. Are you rooting for your conference or are you rooting for the other conference? You have Western Conference pride?
Yeah, I would say some Western Conference pride. I think, it's exciting. Of the four teams, I mean, just from a league perspective, which is probably the only perspective that's worth having for me at this stage, there are three teams that have never won a title and a fourth team that hasn't won one since 1973.
Right.
That'll be, and ironically, with the exception of New York, they're all from what we term small markets. And there's certainly been a push at the league level to enable more competitive parity and not have everything benefit to larger markets like LA. So I think you could say, quote, the system's working. And, whether it's Indiana or Oklahoma City or Minnesota or big bad New York, we'll see.
All right. And what advice would you give someone who wants to build an arena from scratch?
Be prepared to give it a lot of time over a lot of years.
Yeah.
and it's never going to, in software, they say there's only 2 out of 3 things you can get. between quality, design, and cost. Sorry, schedule, design, and cost. And guess what? Same thing applies to arenas.
You can only get two of the three?
We got schedule and we got design.
Yeah. Okay. And what's
We spent a little more than we thought than we were planning.
Yeah, that's true in a New York apartment renovation too. What's the amenity in the arena you're most proud of, or you like the most?
Oh, the thing I like the most is actually just the feel of the actual bowl where you sit and watch the games. It's
Yeah.
tight, it's intimate. In a basketball game, it pulses with energy. We have one wall that's very steep, no suites. It's like a college gym. We get it just look, sport live entertainment. You got to say what's better than just watching
Yeah.
online, and the answer is it's got to be something of the intimacy and energy that people bring, and I think we kind of nailed it on that.
Yeah. I typically watch on TV. I live less than a mile from Madison Square Garden, and I went to the game 6 on Friday night, and I was reminded, ain't nothing like being there. It's an incredible experience. All right, let's go back to talking about data after our sports interlude. Jen, welcome in. Tell folks who don't know where you are. Jen's in Oklahoma. It's got one of those 3 remaining small market teams. Jen, thanks for joining. Question for Steve Ballmer.
Yeah, I am an enthusiastic viewer and user of USA Facts. I'm a graphic designer, a 40-year career. I'm certified in data visualization and have done countless thousands upon thousands of charts and graphs in my career. I've used a lot of government data. The key with government data is often the gaps that one finds in the footnotes. How do you all deal with that when you're presenting that? Now, a good example would be FBI crime data. In the footnotes, you'll find out that there's some very key metropolitan areas that no longer provide data to the FBI. So it totally skews the data. So how do you all deal with that kind of thing when you're determining what you're going to put out there and how you're going to make it look, et cetera?
Fantastic question. Steve.
Yeah, I'd say a couple things. You say no longer. Some of those cities never provided data, just to be fair. And we don't know. Some of them may have high rates, some of them may have low rates of crime. Every city publishes something. They just don't publish necessarily everything. If you go back and look at the city level data, there's 2 things: what gets rolled up by the FBI and what is only available. It turns out it's also true that the definition of a crime is not the same everywhere. What constitutes, for example, a violent crime versus a property crime? Definitions are different across different police jurisdictions. What do? We footnote.
Yeah.
We'll tell you what we got and what we don't have. We'll tell you what the database is. If somebody wants to go say, okay, what are they really presenting? And sometimes, there are important things that even we miss when we first go through because they're not even that well documented at the government database level. I'll give you an example. When it comes time to what state governments spend, the federal government does a roll-up. The roll-up takes about 2.5 years. But the roll-up that comes from OMB, from census, and from the states are not necessarily the same. People don't even call the same, or people may book things, if you will, into different categories. So we know the data is inconsistent. We just cite our source and move on. It's the best we can do, but we do make sure to document. If you go to any of our detailed material, we document it. If you're looking at a TikTok, no, you probably won't see any footnotes.
Well,
Jen, go ahead.
To say one of the things I can say is, having looked at, many, many visualizations over the years, you all do a fantastic job of telling the story and not their story. You're not trying to push a particular thing. And I so respect that.
Jen,
Yes.
I used to be a graphics PA, so I know why I think Steve's graphics are so good. Just explain, as someone with your professional eye, why you think they're so effective?
They're not trying to overcomplicate things. They're showing it with some simplicity. Helps kind of get rid of a lot of the clutter. I think that you'd be surprised over the years how many CEOs and other people have asked in their annual reports to actually make the charts very complicated so that nobody can understand them. You know, that was their goal. So it's your goal is clearly that you really do want people to be able to see things. And the way things can be annotated can help them kind of understand also. And the use of color. You use color not to make it look pretty. You use color to help the brain assess what you're trying to say. And it makes a huge difference in visualizations.
We're going to try something new later this year where you can pause a video and then interact with it, i.e. be able to, post some questions or surrounding context. We'll bring you more based upon where you start. I think we're going to wind up with some preliminary stuff first that people are going, but I think it's an important way to enhance the value somebody can get around videos to have some interactive aspects. My wife tells me she likes our videos, but she always wants to rewind them to make sure she remembered the last thing. So doing some things that can help, I think, will be valuable.
One of the real key things in just very simple movement in video is seeing a graph more from like where it was 5 years ago and where it is today, because what's really makes a mental impression is the change over time and where those changes are. And when you're comparing two graphs side by side, that can be hard for a lot of people to visually see.
Yeah. Jen, thank you for that. Steve, I'd like a data video that I can walk into like I'm Mary Poppins or Bert and be like right inside the data. So I don't need penguins. But I do need to be able to walk right in. Or like on ESPN when they walk back to the back of the set and suddenly they're on the court. Something like that.
And I
Mark, does that mean you want a spoonful of medicine?
Whatever it takes.
Sugar to make that medicine go down?
Whatever it takes.
Can
Absolutely.
I say something about arenas?
Yes, ma'am.
I have never been in arenas, but back in the day when I went to several NBA games around the country, Market Square Arena in Indianapolis was my favorite because there was not a bad seat in the whole place.
Yeah.
It's one of my two favorites that isn't ours.
What's the other one?
I loved Utah's done a remodel now that they have hockey, but last time I was in, it was basketball only. And though a lot of energy, and I like the character and feel in Indiana. At one point, I actually told our guys, why don't we just copy Indiana and be done? But we decided we'd do a little something different.
Yeah. Market Square is great. Jen, thank you. Very grateful to you. And appreciate your analysis. Is excellent. Matt, welcome in. Tell folks after you unmute where you are and what's in your mind for Steve Ballmer.
Oh, hi. So I'm here from Central New York, Finger Lakes area, with two of my favorite people. So, Mark, I was a Note subscriber back to 2004.
Thank you, sir.
Following you for 20 years. Haven't missed an episode of the morning meeting yet. And Steve, I've been a Microsoft fanboy even longer than that. So I did an internship at Apple, but XP won me over. Owned every model of the Surface for I don't know how many years, and anyway, I love it. And then you bought a company where I was very early on, Tell Me Networks. So you've been very good to me, Steve. Anyway, I love this initiative, and I just have a question thought for you. And it's not just a DOGE question, but with the budget trimming, there's a lot of contractors being shed. Employee retirements not being backfilled. And one thing that I've come across, I'm a professor, a social scientist, is that it could be that many sources of government data are backpedaling or shuttering. And so, for example, I work with patent data from the innovation data from the patent office. And by law, they have to post the patents every week, but that's a very user unfriendly data set.
Yes.
And so they've had a subcontractor kind of pretty it up for real people to use, but that contract almost didn't get renewed. And it's unclear if it will get renewed in the future. And so my question is, to what extent do you see USA Facts as kind of taking this raw, I mean, in general, you take raw data and make it consumable, but like how deep do you plan to go? And don't worry, I don't work for the subcontractor. I know you don't do grants. I'm not asking for a grant or anything, but do you see the organization's mission as sustaining some of these critical data resources that the government might start to step back on?
Yeah, again, Republican or Democrat administration aside, we are advocates for government publishing data that helps citizens understand what's going on. I think, right now, so far, not much data has gone away. We are a little worried, for example, in the Department of Education. I'm silent as to whether there should be a department, not be a department. That's how politicians choose to run things. We do think that there's 6 essential data sets that get published by the National Center for Education Statistics. Not every piece of information published by government actually do I think is necessary to be published, but I think there are some essential ones. There have been staff cuts in the National Center for Education Statistics. Worries me that some data might disappear. We published an open letter to Secretary McMahon, just stating why we think this data is important and what data it is. And we will be advocates for data. It's not our job to criticize or not criticize, but there's data I think is essential. There's a quote from James Madison. I know I won't get it exactly right, but let me sort of try it, which is a popular government without popular information or the ability to acquire it is a prelude to a tragedy or a farce or a tragedy or even worse. And that's kind of how I feel about our government. We need to do that, and there needs to be sufficient data for citizens to understand what their government is up to. Different people can think different things about sufficiency. On that, we do have a point of view that we will advocate for.
Steve, I looked up the quote by using Bing, to be a good host. A popular government without popular information or the means of acquiring it is but a prologue to a farce or a tragedy or perhaps both. What a great quote.
Yeah, I think it's inspiring to me. And our founders really understood this. They really did.
Yeah.
There's a thing called the State of the Union. There's a thing called the census. You have Madison with that quote. They understood we needed information. We do a thing called the State of the Union by the numbers. But in some senses, in the president's address, it would be good to be able to be a little objective, but it's just not what the State of the Union is anymore. We got to ground in some of this Madison philosophy, if you will.
Yeah, Matt, thank you. Grateful to you for coming in. Steve, you mentioned the letter you wrote to the Secretary of Education, and again, you caveated it correctly that you're not weighing in on the politics of it, but explain what the letter was and what kind of reaction it got.
Yeah, I mean, we basically said, hey, look, it is important to be able to understand educational outcomes in the country. Here are the 5 databases that we think or 6, I don't remember the precise number. We name them, we think are very important. We think they're important not only, if the perspective is that, the states are responsible for education, it is still valuable for people to see the roll up, particularly the federal government, because the federal government still puts money into the K through 12 education system, for example. And it can be valuable. My life experience is it is valuable to let people understand the workings of other people who do the same thing. So would it be valuable for the educators and people who are interested in education in Georgia to see the outcomes of Michigan, to be able to compare and contrast not just outcomes, but inputs, class sizes, absenteeism rates. I believe that the federal government, if you're going to put that stuff together in a digestible form, the federal government can do that. So even though education is local and people can debate, I mean, it's obviously local. There's obviously support for the federal government, but to whatever degree you think this is only a state's issue or partly a state's issue, letting states compare themselves is a helpful way for them to figure out how to get better.
Have you thought about Japan facts or Greenland facts?
Yeah, when we started, actually, we played around with Swiss facts. My dad's an immigrant or was an immigrant from Switzerland, and we had a Swiss guy I knew here. And the problem is our whole framing is done around our Constitution. We use the prologue of the Constitution, provide for the common welfare, et cetera, et cetera. We use that as our framing mechanism. And without that kind of deep understanding, it gets really hard. And we said, okay, could we ally with people in other countries? I think until we have our underlying technology platform far enough advanced, it's just too much work. And if we can only make our contribution here in the US, that's fine. I mean, heck, we don't even use like OECD data in our site because it's not US government data. Unless the US government publishes it itself, we won't use it.
All right, Steve, you seem like a bright guy, but here's a guy whose son at least is a genius. I don't know if Chris Taylor's a genius, but his son is a genius. Chris, welcome in. Thanks for joining. Great shot behind you. What's on your Steve? Chris is out west, but Chris, tell folks in Idaho. Tell folks what's on your mind for Mr. Ballmer.
Okay, actually, so this print behind me is this was on my grandfather's wall. It's the county election. I forget the author, but from 18 something early, and it's interesting site. Speaking of my grandfather, my grandfather started a what is now the largest Christian publishing company, a privately held Christian publishing company in the States. He had a banner on his wall next to this image. I think it was from Socrates. It's been a long time, but it was something like the hardest thing to do is to figure out how to give your money away. Like I took it as like, who are worthy recipients? He took care of his grandchildren by helping us with our education. So we got something like half our college paid for. He had 28 grandkids. But as a sole owner of this large company, he must have given away certainly more than 100 million, a lot of money. And so my question is, here in your first statement here, that you started this because you thought that your tax dollars would take care of philanthropy, and then you realized, no, you need to do it yourself. But then you wanted to go back and kind of investigate. So that, to me, that's the same question. What you're getting at here is, how are the tax dollars being spent? Where is it going? How is it being used? Let's get the data out in front of everybody. My question is, if you're successful and it shows that the government is not using those funds correctly, will this help push philanthropy money back to the churches, to the individuals, to like, I'm coming from a very conservative background. I would love to see the people do this work, not the government. But so that's the question. If you're successful, does this actually put philanthropy back where it needs to be?
Well, let me say we don't draw any value judgments on what the right way is for things to happen. You know, do I personally have views? Of course I have views. I have views on almost any topic we talk about. Our job, though, in this instance, is to present the data and then let people decide what they think. Right now, we don't publish. We will, I think, at some point in the not too distant future. You can publish what is happening in terms of 501c3s and their budgets and how they're funded. We have not focused in on that area yet. I will tell you that relative to my wife and I's focus in on kids and families, we were both right. I know this now from both USA Facts and our philanthropy. most of the money that comes to many of the child serving organizations that we support do come from government. Government is a big funder of the kind of stuff that we care about. So I was right.
Mhm.
My wife's right. Government doesn't fund everything they have to do. And so we now see how those things relate. I think it's society's job to decide how much philanthropy does versus how much is done by government. I will tell you that just by the numbers, my read, there's simply not enough philanthropy to replace all that government does to support kids and families. I mean, if the money government put out there disappeared, basically, and philanthropy, of course, covers things other than kids and families, art museums, hospitals, universities, and the like. So now I'm giving you my personal point of view. My personal point of view is that for kids and families to not take a step back, money is being spent. It can be cut. That's society's job to decide. If it is, we can show you where it goes away. If it's increased, we can show where it goes away. But whatever happens, there's just not enough money philanthropically. If people choose to cut, there's not enough money to fill in. That's kind of the math. And then, but there's a lot of complexity in that, Chris. A lot of complexity. And we're going to keep doing what we're doing, which is two things. Number one, we're happy payers of our taxes. And number two, we're happy donors of money to a lot of organizations that we think are worthwhile and supporting kids in great ways. One of my favorite things is we've helped fund a program for 18,000 kids, 5 weeks, 5 days a week for K through 8 kids, less affluent kids to learn a little math, learn a little English over the summer and get some enrichment. Stuff like that brings me great joy, but everybody's got to decide what's right for them, and society has to decide how much money to collect in taxes and where to spend it.
Yeah. Chris, thank you. Grateful to you.
Yep.
Thank you.
Hey, Chris, he said your son's a genius and didn't tell me what to know about that. What is your son up to?
I'm hoping you'll hear about him next week or the end of this week. There's some, so he's doing SMRs, small nuclear reactors. Look up Valor, VALAR atomics. If you haven't heard about him yet, you will be hearing about him very quickly.
Super. Thanks
Steve,
for telling me.
Steve, Chris was on recently and talked about his son down at Mar-a-Lago, presenting to some folks down there, including somebody How about that?
He's been in the White House plenty in the last couple months as well, working on things.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Steve, Chris, thank you. Steve, again, people can go to usafacts.org, but just tell people again, if they're interested in your work, supporting your work, using your work, what are the ways they can do that?
usafacts.org or USAFacts YouTube channel. Subscribe to our newsletter, which you can do on usafacts.org, or follow us on Instagram or Twitter.
Okay. We're really grateful to you for spending the hour with us, and we hope you'll come back. And whenever you've got a new video, new project, we'd love to share it with everybody on Two Way.
Super. Appreciate it. Thanks, everybody.
Steve.
Thanks, Mark, for giving me time today.
Thank you, Steve. Grateful to you and your folks for coming on.